Hey bestie, it's time for your next session of Real Talk Friend Therapy with your favorite big sister auntie queen, Daysha Veronica. Oh my God, y'all. I can't believe it. It is the last episode of season 1 for the podcast. I know this might be a sad day for some of y'all because we won't be back until February of 2025. But I have to say that for me personally, this is such a huge milestone because of the crazy year that 2024 has been for me. I had so many starts and stops and delays, and everything was just like extremely frustrating in the moment. But now I am choosing to look at them as tests to my commitment to this project. I think many times people take all the craziness that happens in their life when they're trying to do something as a sign that, this is doomed and I should step back and I shouldn't be doing it. But I personally like to believe that it's the universe testing how interested and committed you are to what you're doing. Is this something that you're really passionate about? Or are you just trying to, do one of those get rich quick schemes? Or are you doing something for the wrong reasons? Are you doing it to keep up with the Joneses? Things like that. Because even though I've been thrown some tough weeks this year, I never wanted to quit doing this work. I definitely needed to take some breaks, though. But as we approach the end of the year and I reflect more about what this year has taught me about myself, I have to say I'm really proud of myself for not giving up. I'm a recovering perfectionist, and I know a version of me in the past would have had so many breakdowns and heart attacks about things not being perfect and not being the way I wanted them to be. And I just love that these struggles really challenged me to break out of those harmful patterns, continued to challenge me to break out of those harmful patterns. I accepted what was, albeit not easily. Definitely did not go gentle into that good night about being let go from my job. But at the same time, I feel like I've made a lot of progress in not dwelling on what I can't change, giving myself space to rest even when I don't want to. Literally did that today. And, just really trying to move on my own timeline. I just finished rereading Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And it was just exactly the book I needed and the energy I needed as we round out the end of this year and get ready to face 2025. It's actually going to be our book club pick when we come back in 2025. So I hope you're as excited as I am about that. And for anyone that's new, or I guess honestly old listeners, this is for you too. It's for everybody. On our Patreon page, one of the perks for subscribers is getting to be part of a book club for the podcast where we will meet virtually to discuss books that I think will really supplement what I talk about on the podcast. However, I just saw that Patreon has a new feature where now I can just offer a certain bonus a la carte. So, if it's not in your budget to pay for the monthly subscription, but you're really interested in joining us for those book club discussions, you will actually have the option to just pay for those discussions separately. So look out for that in the new year. And what I actually think I'm going to do is that we'll have monthly discussions, but the book picks will actually be quarterly so that we can really dive into and put into practice what all these books have to offer. Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway has so many amazing activities that I know I want to implement in my life in the new year. So book club will be a really great way for me to hold myself accountable. So if you want that same accountability for yourself, make sure you are on our email list and following all of the social channels to get those updates. And again, all that information is in the show notes. Okay, so for our last episode of the year, I wanted to talk about a concept that I developed based on an amazing system that a group of negotiation experts put together in their book called Getting to Yes: How to Negotiate Agreement Without Giving In. This is an amazing book on negotiation that I've been exposed to multiple times throughout my life. The first time actually being when I thought I wanted to go into HR and and I did an HR internship at an insurance company in their learning development department. I will say though, compared to other books I've recommended on the podcast, this one is a little more dense. I've actually never finished it each time I've had to pick it up, but thankfully they front load the book with a lot of great information. So only reading half of it will still provide you with so much valuable knowledge. I'll actually have to see if I can get the audiobook version so that I can finally finish it. There is a certain font size that really turns me off from books. That super small, tiny font, I can't stand it. I'd personally rather have a book that's 300, 400 pages than to have a book that's 150 pages, but the font is like the size of a grain of rice. I want to lose my shit. There's this book on Power. I think it's literally just called Power, but it's going to have to be the audiobook because the font size in that book, it is just so disrespectful, so rude. But anyway, Getting to Yes is an amazing book about negotiation, and I can't remember if I've shared this viewpoint on the podcast yet. I know I've talked about it in my book, Eat Your Way to Self-Confidence. But basically, the way I see it, every relationship we have in life, whether it's romantic or platonic or familial, every relationship we have with others is a negotiated agreement, or it will involve negotiation at some point. And I know this might sound controversial to some because of the collective connotation our society has built around the word negotiation. It's actually kind of crazy to me because for some people, the idea of negotiating is basically akin to conflict. It's starting drama, it's being selfish and creating unnecessary tension, and all of these other negative feelings. I also think we associate fear with negotiation because we often talk about it in a salary or job context. So we get a job offer and the salary is less than what we're expecting, but we're also afraid that if we admit that and we ask for more, the job offer will just disappear entirely. So I understand why a lot of you would not like me saying that our very deep and close relationships with others are negotiated agreements if your only understanding of the word is coming from a place of negativity and fear. So let's take a moment to reset and get back to the basics on what negotiation actually means. And if you've been here long enough, you know where I'm going next. So Oxford Dictionary defines it as a discussion aimed at reaching agreement. Cambridge Dictionary defines it as the process of discussing something with someone in order to reach an agreement with them. So basically the same as Oxford. Merriam-Webster did the stupidest thing that I hate that dictionaries do sometimes, which is they used the defined word in the definition. So they wrote the action or process of negotiating or being negotiated, okay. But they also offered the etymology or history of the word, which has its roots in Latin and Middle English. So the Middle English translation of the word was dealing with people. And the Latin word that it's derived from is defined as to do business, trade, or deals. And then an article from Harvard Law School popped up when I was looking up these definitions, and it had several definitions from leading experts, which also included the experts from Getting to Yes. So in Getting to Yes, it is defined as a back and forth communication designed to reach an agreement when you and the other side have some interests that are shared and others that are opposed. In The Mind and Heart of the Negotiator by Lee Thompson, they refer to negotiation as an interpersonal decision-making process that is necessary whenever we cannot achieve our objectives single-handedly. And then in their book, Judgment in the Managerial Decision-Making, Max H. Bazerman and Don A. Moore write that when two or more parties need to reach a joint decision but have different preferences, they negotiate. The last one I will leave you with comes from Investopedia, and I'm including it because I think it offers one more key element that the others miss out on. So they define negotiation as a strategic discussion that involves two or or more parties to resolve an issue in a way that each party finds acceptable. So, taking all of these definitions into consideration, let us keep in mind that negotiation is not supposed to be fearful or negative. It is not supposed to create conflict, but rather heal and prevent conflict. But most importantly, it is not unnecessary or dramatic. Negotiation is about discussion. It is about agreement. It's about finding resolution that is mutually beneficial. Negotiations are supposed to involve back and forth and looking for common ground or shared interests. And again, when we look at that root word from Latin, I love that it emphasizes that at the heart of negotiation is the fact that we are dealing with people. They are not our enemies. They are not evil. They are not out to get us. They are people protecting their best interests, as we all should do. And real talk, I think the people that see negotiation most negatively are the people who don't want to admit that they lack the skills to really look out for their best interests. It's not wrong or mean or rude to protect yourself and to make sure that the people that you do business with, whether that's in a professional sense or a more metaphorical sense, that they're doing right by you. And anyone who tries to shame you to think otherwise, real talk, likely has some ulterior motives. And, in all honesty, I would call them little bitch babies who want a sense of power without really understanding what it takes to get that power. It's actually crazy how many people think having a zero-sum attitude is an effective negotiating strategy. And I'm including myself in that. And for those that aren't familiar, zero-sum thinking is basically when people believe that there are winners and losers, and they will do anything possible to not be the loser. It's when people lose sight of the fact that negotiation is a people-centered process, and they try to bulldoze their way into victory, no matter how badly it actually does for them in the long run. And in my opinion, again, it's someone that's more obsessed with the image of looking strong than it is someone actually caring about doing the work to make those truly powerful, strategic boss decisions. When I got my internship with the insurance company, I got it through a program called Inroads, which was all about helping minority students get access to more corporate spaces through internships. And then in addition to the internship, they also had us participate in their own professional development programming. And so in one of the trainings that they had us do, it was an exercise on negotiation. And when I tell y'all, it has had such a lasting impact on me that I actually use this same exercise with my writing students, when I taught undergrads at UCLA. And I'll explain the connection to writing in a moment, but basically you were given a partner and a story about how there is a limited quantity of an item that your company needs, along with how much money you are allowed to spend. And your partner is given similar parameters. And the buyer is only going to sell to one person. So you and your partner have to decide who is going to get the item. And the exercise is meant to expose how zero-sum thinking truly harms everyone involved. Because most people who do this exercise, you have to report back to the group what you and your partner have decided. And so most people will report back that either one person is going to take all of the product or that they could not reach an agreement. But every now and then, you'll have a pairing that takes a more people-centered approach to the discussion, and they realize that they don't need all of the item. They just need a certain part of it. And it actually turns out that the part that they don't need is exactly the part that the other side needs. And so then they're able to come up with a mutually beneficial solution that allows everyone to get what they need. And I tell you, doing this as a 18, 19-year-old completely blew my mind. It is seared into my memory because when I did this exercise, I totally did it with that zero-sum mindset. I totally went into it being like, I'm not taking no for an answer. I'm coming home with all the product. And I did all this work in my head about how I could scheme and plot to make them let me take home all the product. It was crazy. Like, I did so much more extra work trying to be shady. And I believe my partner was basically the same way. And so, naturally we left the negotiation with nothing. And so when another team was able to figure it out and presented it to the rest of us, I felt like such a dummy, or not a dummy, but I remember feeling like, oh my God, why didn't I ask what you needed it for? It was such a simple question that could have avoided so much extra thinking and labor, but it didn't come to mind because I already went into that negotiation believing that this person on the other side was my enemy and I needed to beat him. So the reason why I use it with my writing students is to teach them about character, and specifically wants and motivations. What is your character willing to do to get what they want? And what does that reveal about them through the action that they are willing to take? Just like this exercise revealed to me that I was ruthless and unscrupulous in getting what I wanted, and that these actions represented that I cared more about the image of winning rather than doing the work and asking the simple question that really would have allowed me to win. And so I also want to highlight that Investopedia definition because you really have to be strategic to be able to negotiate effectively. And I know some people have hangups about being strategic because they also see it as being calculating, which also has a more negative connotation. But to me, being strategic really is about asking all of the questions and looking at all of the angles. It is taking space to really understand everyone's needs and concerns and seeing where mutual agreement can happen. Okay, so now that we have an understanding of what it means to negotiate, I want to talk to you about a BATNA. The authors of Getting to Yes coined this acronym, which stands for Best Alternative to a Negotiated Agreement. And in simple terms, I would describe a BATNA as your personal bottom line. It is the other options or alternatives that you know that you can pursue if this negotiation is not fruitful. And it's not something that you would share with the other side. It really is just a metric for you to understand when the direction of a negotiation is really no longer serving you. So a great example would be, I'm trying to make some extra money, and so I'm posting stuff for sale in my house that I either haven't used in a while or I don't want anymore. And people love to haggle and get a good deal on these resale sites. But as the person selling the stuff, I also want to make sure that I'm recouping a considerable amount of money because my purpose in selling the stuff is to have some extra cash in my pocket. So for me, because I don't have a time constraint or a space constraint and when I need to sell these things by, my BATNA is that if I can't get an item sold for a certain amount that I think is fair, I'm just going to wait until someone meets my price. Because my purpose, again, in doing this is solely for collecting back money. I want the most money. So I've decided already that if a buyer comes along and wants to haggle with me, I'm either not going to do it or, I'll only haggle and lower the price so much. Because it's not the end of the world if the item doesn't sell right away for me. Time is not the thing. So the best alternative in that situation is for me to just wait for the right buyer to come along than to sell for a lower price. But if I was moving, my BATNA would likely be different because now there's a time constraint. If I need to be out of the state in a week, then my BATNA for selling my stuff would be more about whoever can get the item first is who gets it. And then I'd also likely be a lot more flexible on the price because if this negotiation doesn't work, then I'm either going to have to throw out the item or face some kind of penalty because I leave it behind in my apartment. If you're new here, I wrote a book called Eat Your Way to Self-Confidence as an unconventional and innovative take on how to approach the weight loss process as someone who has lost and gained weight several times in their life. And a key chapter in the book is all about how our relationships play a really influential role in our ability to reach our goals. And I offer concepts and tips on how to create friendships that will help you flourish and be your best self. And so in this chapter, I take the BATNA concept and I apply it to friendship. When we're developing our friendships, we never really take the time to think about what are our specific rules and guidelines for being friends with us. The how tall do you need to be to ride this ride safely kind of thing. And I think because a lot of us feel so lonely, we don't think about doing this because we just think that we should work with whatever we're handed. So I'm here to remind you that it feels way more lonely to be in community with people who don't respect or honor our needs than it is to just have a body next to you while you go to brunch. I would 10 times over rather eat brunch alone at a restaurant than to be there with someone I kind of sort of like, but not really, but we take cute pictures together, so I tolerate it. That's what it is. I feel like a lot of people in our current era don't really have friends. They have people in their life that they tolerate, and that is truly no way to live. Just talking about that example, it's making me think of another example, a more people-centered example that comes to mind. So when I went to grad school, I told myself, I am not here to make friends. If I make friends, that's great. It's just not my purpose for paying the $60,000 a year that I'm spending to go to grad school. And actually, that's not what I was spending. But I'm not paying this crazy amount of money to make friends, okay? If I do make them, great, but not why I'm here. I hate saying that because I know how it sounds. It sounds kind of callous, but like to me, like it's just being straight up. I'm paying too much money. And it's so crazy how college and higher education has just been about, people will say, I went to college to find myself. And I'm just like, that's the most privileged thing I think I've ever heard in my life. Like, college is too expensive. Grad school is too expensive. I know this is another tangent, but this idea that these higher ed places, like, yes, in a way they are there to find yourself, but like, when you can't fuck around with money, I need to have some semblance of myself, okay? I need to know something going in to be spending that much money. I don't have time to fuck around. And so when I was interacting with my cohort, and it was becoming very clear to me that these were just not people that I thought I would have a great relationship with, it wasn't hard for me to pull back. As they were trying to pull me back in, and they really wanted to negotiate our relationship and, why I was being so removed and whatever, because I understood that the best alternative for me was really not to, like, I didn't come here for this. It wasn't part of my plan to come here with to make friends at the end of this. I was able to just kind of be like, no, I'm good. I just, I'm not interested. Very clean, very direct. And, that's kind of, you could say that like my BATNA was just looking at the situation. It's like, do I keep giving myself to a relationship that I'm not really invested in? No, because that means that I'm doing that for them. And I don't know them like that, nor do I really like them like that. You know what I'm saying? But so many people will allow themselves to get sucked in to drama and nonsense instead of being clear and thinking about, okay, well, so they're trying to negotiate to have a relationship. What is my BATNA here? What is the best alternative for me if this negotiation doesn't go effectively? Oh, it's just not being friends? Deuces. For me. For other people, depending on like, again, what your values are, it would be different. But I knew for me in that moment, I was like, oh, my BATNA is just not hanging out with y'all. Bet. I'm done. Like, there's nothing to negotiate. I'm not interested. Also, just want to make it clear, I did leave grad school with friends, though. I did have friends. But, again, I had friends. I did. I made connections. I had friends. But, like, again, because I didn't go there for friends, it made it really clear for me in terms of not playing with people who I wasn't interested in and deepening my relationship with the people that I was like, oh, you're really cool. Oh, I'm really interested in you. I just wasn't playing games. And I think whether or not we want to acknowledge it, like sometimes we just know in our hearts that this relationship just isn't going to work. And we play games with people and we keep stringing them along. And in that moment in my life, I was like, I'm not doing this. I don't care if we have to have awkward classes together. I'm just not doing it. And again, I wasn't mean. Again, I'm not mean. I'm not rude. I'm just straightforward. And I know that I hurt their feelings. It hurts anyone's feelings when someone is kind of denying a relationship, right? But at the same time, I don't care enough. And again, I know that sounds horrible, but in reality, a lot of us don't care enough either. But we try to look like we care to be nice people. And so in that moment, I just felt like the best thing I could do for myself and for them was just to be like, this just isn't the business. And we just need to have a professional relationship. And that's it. All right, moving on. I want to read this section of Eat Your Way to Self-Confidence to help further explain how I think about your BATNA in relationship to our friends. Before having any conversation with a friend that you're thinking about letting go of or establishing more boundaries with, I think it's extremely important for you to establish your relationship BATNA. So I know it might be unpleasant to see it this way, but every relationship we have, whether it's romantic or platonic, is a negotiated agreement. From parents and children to couples to students and teachers and so on, we all create relationships with one another to gain a benefit. And if we are decent people, the goal of every relationship is mutual benefit, i.e., I will keep your secrets if you keep mine, I will take care of you now if you take care of me later, etc. We make an agreement that as long as we are in each other's lives, then we will continue to be of mutual benefit to one another. Some people might understand this as reciprocal altruism, or the belief that I will help someone with something that might be difficult for me now, with the implication that they will be there for me in my time of need later. This is often how we start making friends in the first place. However, over time, the goal would be for the agreement to shift into a genuinely altruistic relationship where you help one another without an implied sense of payback because you know they'll always be there for you. But when someone is not keeping up their side of the agreement, that is when we begin to negotiate for the future of a relationship, aka we get into a fight. And now, jumping out of the book for a second, I want to emphasize here that when we get into a fight, when you lower the magnitude of emotion you are feeling, which I know is hard, the fight does not have to be a fight, quote unquote, but more so an opportunity to reset or reclarify needs and wants. And now I'm thinking it actually might be more helpful to think of what we call fights as renegotiations, so that it takes you out of that zero-sum thinking and helps you to remember that your conversation is not about winning or losing, but rather that people-centered, mutually beneficial agreement. Where can we find the harmony again? Okay, back to the book. Now, when it comes to any negotiation, relationship-oriented or not, most people go into these negotiations very ill-prepared. So for authors Roger Fisher, William Ury, and Bruce Patton, developing your BATNA is crucial for having a successful negotiation. For them, having an established BATNA can unlock the exploration of imaginative solutions by giving you the ability to compare composed solutions against your BATNA to see whether it better satisfies your interests. In other words, it allows you to separately process what is really best for you and to use those findings as a guidepost for how to get what you need out of the relationship creatively. It gives you the ability to understand and state your wants and intentions so as to help the person you are talking with understand where they measure up and if they can realistically be the friend that you desire. For me, having a relationship BATNA is beneficial simply because it gives you a clear starting point. So many negotiations and arguments end poorly because of a lack of clarity by both parties in expressing their frustrations and their wants. But then I would also add now in the present that it's also not understanding what is the goal. Why are we arguing? Another issue is that when most people go into a negotiation, especially around the future of a relationship, they go in expecting a fight and that they're competing to either be the winner or the loser. However, it doesn't have to be that way. By creating a relationship BATNA, it can not only give you the clarity you need to express yourself in a difficult conversation, but also help to keep the discussion focused and grounded. Remember that the purpose of a successful negotiation should never be to hurt the other person, but rather to get what you want, a mutually beneficial relationship. But again, that means you have to have a clear understanding of what you want from the friendship, which, real talk, also might not be having a friendship, like I figured out. So as we end this year and start thinking about what we want for our lives in the new year, I would love to help you develop your own relationship BATNA so that you can start making those friends that better align with your needs and wants. To do so is really simple, and I'm going to go back into the book to explain. Take a moment and meditate over what are the actions and values that you believe make up a good friend. When you think of the term good friend, what are the specific qualities that come to mind? Do they need to be able to keep your secrets? Do they need to be able to give you pep talks when you're down? Don't be afraid to be basic in your descriptions. Oftentimes, it's the basic qualities of being a good friend that many people can fail to meet. Once you have an understanding of what a good friend looks like to you, make sure you jot down all of your descriptions on a sheet of paper or a notebook. Also, make a note if there are qualifications that were inspired by the way a certain friend treats you, either good or bad. This is another way that your intuition is trying to communicate with you that there are certain relationships you should prioritize over others. Now, rank all of the qualities from most important to least important. Once you have them ranked, find your cutoff point for most important qualities and your cutoff point for acceptable qualities. You should then be left with 3 categories. So the bottom would be your bare minimum requirements. If you think about the entryway to your friendship as a carnival ride, then these qualities would be the bare minimum that a person would have to bring to the friendship in order to get on the ride, or AKA be your friend. To me, these qualities would be like decent people 101. Within the ring framework, I would say that those in your friendly ring or ring 3 friends would be people that should at least hit the bare minimum. Then you have your acceptable qualities, so that's in the middle. So most of your friends will probably fit into this category. These are friends where your levels of closeness can vary, but they are always people that you have a good rapport with. They tend to be people that we've met based on a mutual condition, like work or school, and that we occasionally hang out with outside of our mutual condition. They're either not the people that you would call in times of need, or you might reach out to them, but you'd be very unsure about whether or not they'd help you. However, depending on how they respond, they could jump up to the next tier. And again, within the ring framework, I would say your ring 3 and your ring 2 friends should hit these qualities. And then your last category would be your most important qualities. I would consider these qualifications of being your best friend. These are people that you can count on basically 100% of the time. Their support or love is never something that you have to question. Don't be surprised at the low number of people that meet these qualifications. This does not mean that you're bougie or that you have asked for too much. Realistically speaking, we only have the capacity to be this type of friend to a handful of people. And so then again, within the ring framework, your ring 1 friends should definitely fit these qualities. This is your relationship BATNA. It is your new barometer on how you can measure whether or not a person is being a good friend to you and if you should attempt to salvage the relationship in question. The reason why I had you rank them is for you to discover what are the bare minimum requirements for being your friend. These would be like the last 3 or 4 qualities on your list. In getting to yes, these bare minimum requirements would be what they call your tripwire, which is an early warning that the content of a possible agreement is beginning to run the risk of being too unattractive. For the purposes of this activity, it means that if your friend can't meet these bare minimum requirements, then, you're running the risk of maintaining a relationship that is not really in service to you, and it would be in your best interest to let that relationship go. But again, I wrote this book when I was fiercely in my cutoff era. I'd say now that it doesn't have to mean a full-on friend breakup, and it could be more like minimizing the time spent together or deprioritizing doing stuff. All right, so what does this look like IRL? So let's say, and I know the situation will be quite controversial, but I think very relevant for a lot of people. Let's say your best friend voted for Trump because he, she, or they has been struggling financially, and they just remember having more money in their bank account during Trump's era. And while they don't like him, nor do they agree with his rhetoric, in their mind, this vote for him was purely about the economy. And so you find out, and it upsets you and makes you want to renegotiate the future of this friendship. So you list out your values, which consist of, you want your friends to be able to keep your secrets. You want them to be curious about what's going on in your life. They help you to solve problems. They make time to be in community with you. They check in on you when you're sick or sad. They're supportive of your ambitions, communicates with kindness and empathy, respects my identity, and then knows the names of my family members. And let's say this is my rank order. So my bare minimum requirements to be my friend are communicates with kindness and empathy, respects my identity, and they know the name of my family members. So in this scenario, I'm upset that they voted for Trump and they still want to be friends with me, but I'm unsure. Again, BATNA is best alternative to a negotiated agreement. And the agreement that you are trying to negotiate is whether or not you can still be their friend after learning about their vote. Now, I understand that this is a really emotionally fraught situation, and rightfully so, because Trump is a really polarizing figure that invokes a lot of negative connotations for a lot of people. So I don't throw out this example all willy-nilly or out without regard to the seriousness of what it means to have voted for him. But I also know a lot of people are grappling with this. I know people personally that are grappling with this. And while I think taking our emotions into consideration is important when making such a serious decision as ending a friendship, I still think it's important to consider how this person has fit into your life before this fracture point. So let's say that this person not only meets your basic requirements, but they hit all those important qualities, or at least a good chunk of them. Again, you can do what you think you need to do, but based on what you've noted that you need and desire in a friendship, I don't think it makes sense to completely cut that person out of your life. Now, you might need some space. You might need firmer boundaries going forward. But it doesn't sound like to me that this is a relationship that you want to fully disengage with, but rather that you need time and space to reckon with your new perspective of this person. And maybe it means you change what parts of yourself that you're willing to bring to the relationship. Again, it's a negotiation. And that's why I love thinking about it in that way, because it's not just, I want you to stay in my life. And so then the question is, well, do I stay in their life as the exact same person? You don't have to do that, So if they want to maintain the friendship, you can say, well, I'm willing to be friends, but I don't want to hang out as much, or as much as I care about you, I do not have the capacity to be as curious about your life as I once was. Or I'm not going to prioritize checking in the way I used to. Maybe you considered them to be a ring 1 friend, but now you feel more comfortable having them be more of a ring 2 or a ring 3 friend. And if you're new here, sorry, it's just hitting me, and you're like, what is with all these rings? I would highly recommend going back to episode 3. It's called What is Friendship? And in that episode, I do a full breakdown of the friendship rings. Now, making these changes might hurt their feelings. But again, the other option on the table is not being friends. So either way, you're gonna hurt their feelings, whether you're not friends with them or you negotiate. So really, the BATNA list is there to help you clarify if not being friends because of this fracture would be more beneficial to you or not. Because let's look at those tripwire values. And let's say that your friend in question not only voted for Trump, but they are constantly belittling you. They joke abrasively about aspects of your identity, and they tell you to chill when you get upset. And then they have no idea what your mom's name is, even though y'all have been friends for 15 years, and they see her every Thanksgiving. In that situation, I would say that your BATNA is not only telling you, but screaming at you that this person and this relationship is not serving you because this person doesn't even meet your bare minimum qualities of what you need in a friendship. One of the reasons why I find it helpful to see my friendships and honestly just all my relationships as negotiations is because it reminds me that whatever the issue is that we're going through, it's a two-way street. And so our discussion is not about winning or losing, but actually making sure that everyone's needs are being heard and ideally met. It's actually why I don't really care for apologies that just involve saying sorry, because of how empty saying sorry can be. Saying sorry doesn't often get to the root of the problem or help to give confidence that it won't happen again. And I also know that because saying sorry can feel like admitting to being wrong, there can be a lot of pride and ego that gets wrapped up in admitting those words. So my boyfriend and I, we get into arguments. Like he forgot to come to one of my plays and it really hurt me. I will make it clear that I'm not looking for an apology or an admission of wrongdoing. I'm more so looking to figure out what happened and how can we not have it happen in the future? How can we make sure we don't do this again? And this is actually a conflict that we got into once. So I was having a play staged in a different city, and he said he wasn't sure if he could come because he needed to work. And I got really offended that for me, it felt like he was choosing work over supporting me during a really important time. I really value having the people in my life support me on my creative endeavors. So I sat him down and I explained how that hurt me and that it's really important to me to have the people I love at my shows, and asked if it was possible for him not to go to this work gig so that he could come. And so again, because I approached our conversation as a negotiation, he revealed to me that since we bought our house, and yes, I said bought, it's the thing that people are like, what'd you just say? It doesn't sound weird to me, but I say bought instead of bought. I think that's how you're supposed to say it. But yes, we bought our house. All of the new responsibilities that we had to pay for were really straining him financially. And so he kind of feels like he needs to prioritize work right now to be able to pay for our new lifestyle. But that he didn't mean to hurt me, and asked if we could kind of prioritize what are the most important shows for him to be at versus shows that it would be okay if he missed to prioritize work. Now, imagine if I had entered into that conversation with a zero-sum mindset and said, I feel like you don't love me because you're not coming to my show. That statement only prioritizes meeting my wants and needs and leaves no room for his very real need of being able to pay the bills. And not only that, it would put him on the defensive, because then he would feel like he has to prove that I'm wrong because he does care about me. So all of this is to say that knowing our core values is really important, especially when entering into conflict territory, because it can keep you in a more creative headspace when trying to find solutions. Remember, at the end of the day, we just want solutions that allow everyone to feel heard and ideally get their needs met. Because sometimes you might not get what you wanted. Like my boyfriend couldn't come to the show, but because I understand why, and we negotiated a priority system, my core need was met, which was to just feel loved and supported. It just wasn't the way I initially envisioned it and limited it to be. I initially made it seem like the only way that he could show that he supported me was by going to my show. But by keeping the dialogue open and people-centered, we discovered that there are other ways for him to meet that need that also allow him to meet his need of being able to pay the bills. So I really hope y'all know I'm not trying to downplay the seriousness of the Trump thing. I just also don't want people to lose sight of what existed in a relationship before Trump. And so I hope this concept can offer at least a little sense of direction as we all evaluate what we want our relationships to look like in 2025. All right, besties, that's all I got for you for this year. Again, if you've been here since day one, know that I love you so deeply, and I appreciate your support from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for riding with me through all of the chaos, and I'm so very excited for all the amazing things to come for the podcast and how I can best serve you in 2025 and beyond. If you want to stay connected with me through the break, remember that we have a free Facebook group that you can join to discuss and connect with other listeners. We have the Patreon that will have a lot of bonus content popping up through the break. And then remember to sign up for the email list and to follow me and Yes Queen for updates when season 2 will be releasing. All right, besties, I hope you have an amazing holiday season. I hope it is restful and reflective and relaxing for you. And I cannot wait to hang out with you in 2025. Much love and hugs, besties. Your girl is out. Loving Real Talk Friend Therapy? Of course you are. So don't forget to show us some love with a 5-star review wherever you are listening, and to join our Patreon to unlock bonus recordings, videos, private chats, and more.